Sergeant First Class Atkins' extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, Detachment A-102, 5th Special Forces Group, 1st Special Forces, and the United States Army.
Thank you for joining us for the program. Our guest today is Medal of Honor recipient, U.S. Army Command Sergeant Major, retired Benny G. Atkins of Opelika. We're sitting in his living room. Thank you for hosting us.
Mary and I appreciate you coming today, and I would I'm a very humbled old retired Command Sergeant Major, and I want everyone to know that this medal that I'm honored to have belongs to the other 16 Special Forces soldiers that were with me in the battle, with special emphasis on the 5 that paid the ultimate price.
How were you treated at the White House on September 15th?
I'll tell you what, on September the 15th, the President of the United States was a very hospitable individual. All the White House staff was great. I have heard that probably the food was some of the best in the world.
You've been interviewed nationally, internationally. Suddenly you're a celebrity.
I'm not the celebrity. It's those other 16 American soldiers that with me that are the celebrity.
You represented that battle. Take us back to that time.
That battle was March 1966 in the Republic of Vietnam in the Ashau Valley. And like I say, I was assigned, there's a little story that goes with this assignment, and the little story that this assignment is that I was in the country, and Sergeant Major come after me and said, I have a job, I need you to be my intelligence sergeant at the C-team level, which was rear echelon. Well, I cleared this, and 2 or 3 days later reported to the Sergeant Major there, and he told me, he said, I have some real bad news for you. Said, I'm going to have to send you out to Team A-102. Said the intelligence sergeant in that team has been wounded and medevaced out. Said, I'm going to have to send you out to that location. So I was in that location about 90 to 100 days prior to the battle, and each day I was out there, the North Vietnamese shot at me. I think they were just zeroing their weapons.
In this 38-hour battle, you were wounded. What was it, 18 times?
That's what, yes, that's what they say with this. Yes, I was fortunate. It was not my time. Some of the wounds were from gunshot wounds. Some of the wounds was from mortar shrapnel. Some of the wounds was from hand grenade shrapnel. And the situation in that battle was that we had to utilize any type of a weapon that we could, and we were in a mountainous jungle area, and there was no land resupply. Everything that we had to receive was from air, and of course the North Vietnamese Army waited until it was real bad weather before they would attack. So our support was very limited due to the weather. And like I say, with this we had several incidents that was something different. And one was a good example. We had one of the American Special Forces soldiers who was retired, Major John Bradford now, was wounded, and I was helped put him on an evacuation helicopter. Well, we got to looking on the evacuation helicopter, had some of our friendly soldiers that were in there that was wanting a way out of the battle. And one of them locked and loaded on myself and Bradford, and thankfully he moved to the door of the helicopter, and the North Vietnamese shot him and killed him through the door. So like I said, it was not my day to be killed.
It's been written that you held off some 175 of the enemy, is that right? And you ran out of ammunition at some point?
No, that is, I did not have body count myself, but that's what some of the other members said. I killed that many people with the variety of weapons. But,
after this 38-hour battle, and here you are wounded some 18 times, you then led your men through the jungle, didn't you?
Yeah, we were ordered to evacuate the camp, and myself and the executive officer went back to get an American that was severely wounded on a stretcher. And when we got to the area with the stretcher, all of the helicopters were gone. So we had to evade into the jungle, and this, unfortunately, the soldier died in the jungle. But I was really fortunate there based upon the fact that I was able to communicate with another helicopter by a little FM radio with the antenna shot off, and I stood in the water utilizing myself as an antenna and communicated enough that they come in to pick us up, and they shot this helicopter down. So we had to go again, and I was with one other Special Forces officer who was badly wounded, and we had 5 indigenous personnel with us, and one of the indigenous personnel was killed in that encounter. And we were run all night and most of the night, and finally the North Vietnamese soldiers had us surrounded on a little hill there in the jungle, and we were with 10 to 15 meters of us just trying to get a shot to kill us. And at that time, we started hearing a noise and seeing some eyes move around us. And come to find out, there was a tiger smelled the blood on us and was stalking us in the jungle. And the North Vietnamese soldiers were more afraid of the tiger than they were us, so they backed off and we were gone again. So we were able to get away, and were able to be extracted the next day from the jungle.
Do you ever stay in touch with any of the families of these men that you fought with?
Thankfully, now there is 5 other members living. 4 of them attended the ceremony with me in Washington, D.C. And one did call me from living in Bangkok, Thailand, and called me and could not come, but was glad to be there and talk with me. And thankfully, I had 3 children of the one of the soldiers that was there, and these 3 children did attend the ceremony, and their father is now deceased, but it was a survivor of the battle, and that was really enjoyed that they were my guests with this presentation.
I noticed on the Special Forces website that some 258 service members received the Medal of Honor for combat actions in the Vietnam War. 171 of those recipients were U.S. Army soldiers like yourself. How many of these recipients are still living again?
As I understand, the total number I'm talking about from World War II Korea, Vietnam, Somalia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. I was told I'm number 78 living at this time.
Do you think the Vietnam veterans are now getting their due recognition? Contrast that with the welcome home that the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans are getting today.
I think so at this date and time, but we definitely did not when we were returning from the Vietnam era. But that is, that's history. So I think now that this is something that I want to emphasize and spend some volunteer time in preventing this from happening to our military today.
It strikes me that special forces or special operations used in Vietnam were sort of the forerunners of the type of fighting the military does today in the war on terror.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt that this is true. What so many don't realize about special forces, that they're teachers as well as fighters. That they teach not only other forces as force multipliers, but in civil affairs and as well as community activities.
And we do need to acknowledge that you taught the, what was it, Jungle Survival School in the Panama Canal Zone?
I did not do this much there. I was just a command sergeant major there. Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask you something, Sergeant Major Atkins. You mentioned teaching a minute ago, that Special Forces members teach. After you retired from the Army, you actually got 3 degrees from Troy University, and you yourself became a teacher.
Yes, that's right. I did some teaching. I did teach with some with Southern Union State Junior College, as I did some adult education and occasionally a computer class, and I did some adjunct work with Auburn University, and that was again in adult education and occasionally a low-level mathematics course.
Your Troy University degrees, did you get them at, say, Phoenix City campus and Fort Benning?
Yes, I did. They were at Phoenix City campus and occasionally a class or two over on the Fort Benning installation itself, yes.
What do you want your listeners to know about not only the Medal of Honor which you have received, but you're the past national commander of the Legion of Valor? You have a t-shirt on, well, a shirt on today, a polo shirt, with that insignia.
Well, the Legion of Valor is an organization that to be a member you must have received one of the top 2 awards for valor. And I was humbled with that organization to be the national commander in 2012, and I did bring in, host the convention here in the Auburn and Fort Benning area, and like I said, I had there was 32 of the medal holders guests at the convention, so it is an organization that definitely supports and only open to high valor award personnel.
Sergeant Major Atkins, when you joined the Army, you were actually drafted. Nowadays we have an all-volunteer military. Which do you think is the better way to go?
There's pros and cons with it. Number one, there's no doubt that the all-volunteer Army, the soldiers is more professional. They're more competent individuals. But the draft had its advantages based upon the camaraderie of being in the military and the patriotism and so forth is available with the draft. And like I like to tell some people, the a person that spends time in the military and has even drafted in said it's nothing more than getting to talk bad about his drill sergeant. The camaraderie is there.
Is there anything else you want your listeners, your viewers to know about your service in the Vietnam War, your Medal of Honor, whatever?
There's no doubt that, like I say, I was just an average soldier in an elite unit.
But what makes a hero?
A hero is those 5 men. A hero is the 5 men that paid the ultimate price in that battle. I can tell their names even 48 years later. I can tell the names and how unfortunately they died.
They paid the ultimate price.
Yes.
Is there anything you want to say to the military families who are listening to you right now?
The military families are the backbone of the professional military. In other words, my wife Mary stayed at home, raised the children, and while I was fighting wars all over the world, and that is really that's the hero, is the Army ladies and wives.
Do you have any comments on the war on terror or ISIS?
The soldiers that are fighting this war do the absolutely best. Be the best that you can be highly professional, and I will do everything I can here to see that you get the support that you need to accomplish our mission, and thank them very much for their service.
We do need to acknowledge that part of your training in the U.S. Army was at Fort Benning, which is in our coverage area.
That part of the training was there with, yes, I was stationed about 2.5 years with the 2nd Infantry Division at Fort Benning, and that was about 1958 to 1961. That's almost several years before you were born, right?
I know a lot of your viewers and listeners would like to thank you for your service to our country. And whether or not you think of yourself as a hero, obviously the President of the United States does, as do so many of your...
Yeah, like I say, the other 16 members that I want are the real heroes, not me. I'm just wearing this for them.
Thank you so much. Our guest has been U.S. Army Command Sergeant Major Benny G. Adkins, retired. We've been talking with him in his living room in Opelika, Alabama. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to ask Benny Atkins to come join me on stage. Now, let me just say, the first thing you need to know is when Benny and I met in the Oval Office, he asked if he could sign back up. His lovely wife was not amused. Most days, you can find Benny at home down in Opelika, Alabama. Tending his garden or his pontoon boat out on the lake. He's been married to Mary for 58 years. He's a proud father of 5, grandfather of 6. At 80, still going strong. A couple of years ago, he came here to the White House with his fellow veterans for a breakfast we had on Veterans Day. He tells folk he was the only person he knows who has spilled his dessert in the White House. And I just have to correct you, that makes 2 of us. I've messed up my tie, I've messed up my pants. But in the spring of 1966, Benny was just 32 years old on his second tour in Vietnam. He and his fellow Green Berets were at an isolated camp along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. A huge North Vietnamese force attacked, bombarding Benny and his comrades with mortars and white phosphorus at a time it was nearly impossible to move without being wounded or killed. But Benny ran into enemy fire again and again to retrieve supplies and ammo, to carry the wounded to safety, to man the mortar pit, holding off wave after wave of enemy assaults. 3 times explosions blasted him out of that mortar pit, and 3 times he returned. I have to be honest, in a battle and daring escape that lasted 4 days, Benny performed so many acts of bravery, we actually don't have time to talk about all of them. Let me just mention 3. On the first day, Benny was helping load a wounded American onto a helicopter. A Vietnamese soldier jumped onto the helo trying to escape the battle and aimed his weapon directly at the wounded soldier, ready to shoot. Benny stepped in, shielded his comrade, placing himself directly in the line of fire, helping to save his wounded comrade. At another point in the battle, Benny and a few other soldiers were trapped in the mortar pit, covered in shrapnel and smoking debris. Their only exit was blocked by enemy machine gun fire. So Benny thought fast. He dug a hole out of the pit and snuck out the other side. As another American escaped through that hole, he was shot in the leg. An enemy soldier charged him, hoping to capture a live POW, and Benny fired, taking out that enemy and pulling his fellow American to safety. By the 3rd day of battle, Benny and a few others had managed to escape into the jungle. He had cuts and wounds all over his body, but he refused to be evacuated. When a rescue helicopter arrived, Benny insisted that others go instead. And so on the 3rd night, Benny, wounded and bleeding, found himself with his men up on that jungle hill, exhausted and surrounded with the enemy closing in. And after all they had been through, as if it weren't enough, there was something more. You can't make this up. There in the jungle, they heard the growls of a tiger. It turns out that tiger might have been the best thing that happened to Benny in during those days, because he says the North Vietnamese were more scared of that tiger than they were of us. So the enemy fled. Benny and his squad made their escape, and they were rescued finally the next morning. In Benny's life, we see the enduring service of our men and women in uniform. He went on to serve a 3rd tour in Vietnam, a total of more than 2 decades in uniform. After he retired, he earned his master's degree, actually not 1 but 2, opened up an accounting firm, taught adult education classes, became national commander of the Legion of Valor Veterans Organization. So he has earned his retirement, despite what he says. He's living outside Auburn. And yes, he is a fan of the Auburn Tigers, although I did a poll of the family, and there's some Crimson Tide fans here. So there's obviously some divisions. But Benny will tell you that he owes everything to the men he served with in Vietnam, especially the 5 who gave their lives in that battle. Every member of his unit was killed or wounded. Every single one was recognized for their service. Today we're joined by some of the men who served with Benny, including Major John Bradford, the soldier that Benny shielded in that helicopter, and Major Wayne Murray, the soldier Benny saved from being captured. And I'd ask them and all of our Vietnam veterans who are here today to please stand or raise your hand to be recognized. Now I ask that the citation be read.
President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Sergeant First Class Benny G. Atkins, United States Army. Sergeant First Class Benny G. Atkins distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty while serving as an intelligence sergeant with Detachment A-102, 5th Special Forces Group, 1st Special Forces, during combat operations against an armed enemy at Camp Eschou, Republic of Vietnam, from March 9th to 12th, 1966. When the camp was attacked by a large North Vietnamese and Viet Cong force in the early morning hours, Sergeant First Class Atkins rushed through intense enemy fire and manned a mortar position, continually adjusting fire for the camp, despite incurring wounds as the mortar pit received several direct hits from enemy mortars. Upon learning that several soldiers were wounded near the center of camp, he temporarily turned the mortar over to another soldier, ran through exploding mortar rounds, and dragged several comrades to safety. As the hostile fire subsided, Sergeant First Class Atkins exposed himself to sporadic sniper fire while carrying his wounded comrades to the camp dispensary. When Sergeant First Class Atkins and his group of defenders came under heavy small arms fire from members of the civilian irregular defense group that had defected to fight with the North Vietnamese, he maneuvered outside the camp to evacuate a seriously wounded American and draw fire, all the while successfully covering the rescue. When a resupply airdrop landed outside of the camp perimeter, Sergeant First Class Atkins again moved outside of the camp walls to retrieve the much-needed supplies. During the early morning hours of March 10, 1966, enemy forces launched their main attack, and within 2 hours, Sergeant First Class Atkins was the only man firing a mortar weapon. When all mortar rounds were expended, Sergeant First Class Atkins began placing effective recoilless rifle fire upon enemy positions. Despite receiving additional wounds from enemy rounds exploding on his position, Sergeant First Class Atkins fought off intense waves of attacking Viet Cong. Sergeant First Class Atkins eliminated numerous insurgents with small arms fire after withdrawing to a communications bunker with several soldiers. Running extremely low on ammunition, he returned to the mortar pit, gathered vital ammunition, and ran through intense fire back to the bunker. After being ordered to evacuate the camp, Sergeant First Class Atkins and a small group of soldiers destroyed all signal equipment and classified documents, dug their way out of the rear of the bunker, and fought their way out of the camp. While carrying a wounded soldier to the extraction point, he learned that the last helicopter had already departed. Sergeant First Class Atkins led the group while evading the enemy until they were rescued by helicopter on March 12, 1966. During the 38-hour battle and 48 hours of escape and evasion, fighting with mortars, machine guns, recoilless rifles, small arms, and hand grenades, it was estimated that Sergeant First Class Atkins had killed between 135 and 175 of the enemy while sustaining 18 different wounds to his body. Sergeant First Class Atkins' extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, Detachment A-102, 5th Special Forces Group, 1st Special Forces, and the United States Army.